You're listening to the Plant Code Podcast, brought to you by Max and Eric.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Plant Code Podcast. I'm Max, and today I'm joined by three very special guests. They are cats, and they're not listening to me right now. They're outside on the balcony, which is why you may hear some birds chirping and some passing traffic. Hopefully not too many cars. I did actually have a few guests lined up for this week. However, I chose to not bring anyone to the show because we've had a few complaints about the audio quality of the episodes. And I do agree we can do better, which is why we have actually ordered two brand new microphones that should arrive in the next few days and be in use for our next episode next week. So looking forward to that, and thank you all for your patience. It's been a busy week for the Plant Code. We were in Barcelona last weekend, and we were lucky to meet the Anonymous for the Voiceless chapter in Barcelona and spend a little bit of time with them. Actually made a 3-minute video where I interviewed two of the members. So if you haven't seen that yet, do check it out. It's on YouTube. There's a link to it on our Instagram page where you can find us at The Plant Code, and on Facebook at The Plant Code as well. Do get in touch with us. We do love hearing from you. And if there's anything you want us to talk about, we love to have suggestions. And yeah, so let's get into it. I'm doing a lot of talking today as I'm by myself. So I decided to do a quick episode this week about gluten because I'd never heard so much about gluten since I went vegan, and people always ask me, oh, you're vegan, but do you eat bread? Which I always found very confusing. And I think the reason behind that is you often find the gluten-free products in the same area as the vegan ones. I don't really know. Or maybe it's because they find people who eat gluten-free bread as annoying as vegan people. I don't know. I don't know where the logic is behind that. But anyway, that's the case, and maybe some of you can relate to that and have been asked multiple times as well whether or not you eat bread. So I kind of realized that I didn't actually know what gluten was, where it comes from, what it does, and why it's so important. So, by the way, I do eat bread. I'm not gluten-free. I found out that bread is actually the most consumed food in the world. It must be tough to have to give that up, as bread is amazing. First of all, I tried Googling what the definition of gluten is. So if you can pause this episode and answer that question confidently of what gluten actually is, I congratulate you, because I was incapable of it. So according to medicalnewstoday.com, gluten is a family of proteins found in grains like wheat, rye, spelt and barley, which really did not help me that much. And of the gluten containing grains, wheat is by far the most commonly consumed. And the two main proteins in gluten are glutenin and gliadin. I hope I said that right. And it's gliadin that's responsible for most of the negative health effects that people may have. There's not only gluten in bread, it's also in pastas, noodles, pastries, cakes, in a lot of sauces as well that I didn't really know about, because they use wheat flour as a thickener, so a lot of sauces aren't actually gluten-free. And most importantly, you do find gluten in beer. Most beer is not actually gluten-free because they're malt beverages, and malt is soaked grains. If you are gluten intolerant or you're trying to reduce your gluten intake, you can't drink beer, which would make me very sad because I love beer and vegan beer. And we did an episode actually about vegan alcohol, which is episode number 2. So if you haven't listened to that, do check it out. It's quite interesting. And you'd be surprised by the strange animal products that are put into beer. But there's also some in bread, and we'll get into that in a minute. So why is gluten dangerous? So it's only really dangerous for people who suffer from a disease called the celiac disease. So according to beyondceliac.org, less than 1% of the population is celiac. So it's not very common, but it's a very serious autoimmune disorder. So when a celiac person eats gluten, the protein interferes with the absorption of nutrients from food by damaging a part of the small intestine. So that can lead to malnourishment and a host of other problems, including cancers, thyroid disease, osteoporosis, infertility, and the onset of other autoimmune diseases. So it's serious business. If you are celiac and you're listening to this, I really didn't know that much about the disease, so you have my full compassion. And 83% of people with celiac disease are undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. It takes 6 to 10 years for the average person to be correctly diagnosed in the US. What's even harder about the celiac disease is that the only way to control it is by 100% gluten-free diet, and there's no pharmaceutical treatment for it. So you can't really do anything to counter the disease. You can only avoid consuming any of those products. On beyondceliac.org, they also mentioned that we waste billions of healthcare dollars on unnecessary testing and treatment for those seeking a diagnosis. So clearly there's a lot more people who think they are gluten intolerant and celiac than there actually are. And the Department of Life, Health and Environmental Sciences in Italy did an interesting study in 2015 where they looked at almost 400 people who were self-diagnosed themselves with gluten intolerance and investigated whether or not their health improved on a gluten-free diet. And the results showed that only 14.5% of those people actually had an issue with gluten. So there are a lot of people who are self-diagnosing themselves with gluten intolerance when it's not actually the case. I'm not reducing the importance of gluten intolerance or of the celiac disease. I'm just saying that we have a tendency to claim that we're intolerant to gluten more often than we actually are. And another thing to keep in mind, that a gluten-free diet can be a lot lower in nutrients such as fiber, iron, B12, calcium, zinc. Cutting gluten from your diet, if you don't have to, isn't necessarily a good thing, especially as we mentioned in our episode about B12, just how many people are... That's the doorbell. I'll be right back. I apologize for the brief interruption. I just had some cat litter delivered for my 3 guests today, and they're still just sitting on the balcony. They're not participating in today's episode. It's all me talking today. So as I was saying, if you are going to cut gluten from your diet, you do have to be careful because you're going to be missing out on a lot of nutrients as well. So you do have to take that into account. And as we mentioned as well previously, that a large percentage of the population is deficient in fiber. By cutting out gluten as well, that's only going to increase your fiber deficiency if you already are. If you do decide to cut out gluten, you need to make sure that you are replacing it with the right kind of things. And another way for you to get fiber is from brown rice, from quinoa, fruits and vegetables, and beans. So another question that I wanted to answer regarding gluten is bread healthy? You do hear a lot of people saying that they stopped eating bread to lose weight or for their health. However, first of all, there are thousands of kinds of bread, and they aren't all equal when it comes to nutritional value. And for example, white bread might do more harm than good because it's processed and it doesn't have the same amount of nutrients, whereas wholemeal bread, for example, provides a great amount of fiber and vitamin B, as we mentioned earlier. So it does depend on what type of bread you are eating. And consuming bread in moderation will not lead to weight gain. But it's true that if you're eating a sandwich that's filled with processed meat and high-fat ingredients, then yeah, probably you will gain weight. And bread is full of carbs, and carbs have a really bad reputation, I think. And quite sadly, like, people are happy to eat red meat, fish, eggs, all these animal products, but then they're cutting carbs. And carbs have a really bad reputation, I found, and I found that quite sad because carbs are the fuel of your body, and bread is mostly carbs. However, the healthiest source of carbs that you can find are fruit, vegetables, beans, and minimally processed grains. And like with bread, and in a similar kind of way, there's lots of different types of carbs, and they don't all have the same nutritional value. So like we said, you should avoid the white sliced breads because they're highly processed and they're a simple carbohydrate that don't really provide any nutritional value to you. And on the same level of highly processed carbs, you have refined pasta, you have cakes, you have donuts, you have crackers. All these things, they provide a very quick sugar rush, and as they don't have fiber in them, they won't make you feel full and they'll make you eat more, and that can lead to weight gain, diabetes, and heart disease, which is similar to eating meat. So any kind of processed food, you should definitely avoid it. But once again, that doesn't mean you should cut out all bread. go for it with the whole meal that provides the fibre, the minerals and the vitamin B. And then which brings me to another question, which is bread vegan? I do feel I have to answer that question because as vegans we do always seem to check the ingredients, and you find really odd animal products in food today. It's just incredible. So the traditional recipe for bread, which I actually didn't know, which is quite embarrassing, is just yeast, flour, water and salt. 4 ingredients, nice and simple, and that's good. That's good for you, it's healthy. But the most common non-vegan ingredients that we do find in bread are honey, eggs and milk products, milk solids. You get milk products everywhere nowadays. It's unbelievable. I think it was I was buying sesame seeds and they had milk products in them as well, which is unbelievable. Anyway, there's a very good article on happyhappyvegan.com. It's happy 2 times. I didn't just repeat myself. So it's happyhappyvegan.com. Now I just said it 4 times. And they listed the types of vegan bread and those that aren't vegan. So in general, sourdough, pita, focaccia and ciabatta. And ciabatta actually means slipper in Italian. I just found that out and I thought I'd share that with you if you didn't know. These breads are usually vegan. However, it's always good to check because you never know. It's always good to double check, but you're usually safe with these ones. And sadly, naan, the Indian bread, usually isn't vegan as it's traditionally made with eggs, yogurt and brushed with ghee. So to all you Indian food lovers like myself, naan is not really an option. And obviously garlic bread usually isn't vegan because it has butter in it. And it's actually very easy to make vegan garlic bread. If you do go to this happyhappyvegan.com website, they do have a lot of, they've got 19 bread recipes that you can make that are fully vegan, which is amazing. So as always, do remember to check the ingredients when you are shopping for bread. But then again, I don't know why I'm telling you that because we always do it anyway, don't we, as vegans? So I don't really have much else to say about it, really. I just wanted to kind of give a little bit more information on gluten, what it is, where it comes from, and if it's really that bad for you. So to my research, seems like bread actually isn't that bad. Just make sure that you are eating the right types of bread, and make sure that if you do go gluten free, you don't do it for the wrong reasons. Because a lot of people consider that giving up gluten is going to make them healthier, because it's not necessarily the case. As I think I mentioned earlier, carbs should make up to 55 to 60% of a healthy diet, and that's where gluten is found. If you cut out wheat, rye, barley and the other grains that provide gluten, it eliminates some key sources of complex carbohydrates needed to balance a diet. And as we mentioned a couple of times, you're going to lose out on fiber, you're going to lose out on vitamin B, and also iron, calcium, vitamin D as well. So gluten-free bread might help you fill the void, but they tend to be lower in fiber and often contain more sugar and fat to make up for the lack of texture and flavour when gluten is left out. As always, you can supplement these nutrients, but we tend to absorb nutrients better when they come from food. And also, if you want to lose weight, giving up gluten isn't necessarily the best way to go. I can understand why you would lose weight if you give up gluten, because I suppose you're giving up cakes and you're giving up, if you eat white bread or the processed bread, and if you give that up, it probably is going to help you lose some weight. And the problem when you cut out an entire food group, such as carbs, is that as soon as you return to your habits of eating that food again, you regain that weight very, very quickly. And it's not easy to stick with a gluten-free diet as well, because it can be actually quite expensive as well, because the products that you're going to be replacing gluten with can be quite costly, and you're going to miss out on the important nutrients that some gluten products are providing for you. And so if you're just cutting gluten to lose weight, as in the case of another fad diet, that's not going to last. I mean, it's better to go fully vegan if you're not, or to maybe just change the sources of gluten that you are eating. And so just to round it up, if you do choose to go gluten-free, do make sure you go to see a doctor and make sure that you are getting all these important nutrients that we have mentioned. and you can just reduce your intake of bread or choose to eat better bread. I'm going to still keep on enjoying my bread, and so this research has kind of helped me understand why people consider that vegan people don't eat bread, but for me it's still a little bit of a mystery of why I would give up bread. Especially if you go to a lot of restaurants that don't have many vegan options, you're pretty much counting on that bread basket to fill you up a little bit so you can at least go home with a full stomach. I hope you got some information from this short episode. I hope it helped you clear things up a little bit in your side when it comes to gluten. So just to wrap it up as well, it's only if you do suffer from celiac disease, which is a very serious disease, and if you think you might be, then do consider getting yourself checked for it. But if you're not celiac, then there's no real reason to give up eating bread and whole grain and drinking beer. In moderation, of course. And I realize this is the first episode where I'm actually encouraging you to continue eating something rather than give it up. So it's been quite a paradoxical episode. I'm rambling now. So yeah, this is probably going to be the only episode of me talking alone, because it's actually not as fun as having guests on the show. And my 3 guests today have absolutely no interest in me at all. They're just living the life on the balcony. So do tune in next week. I will be traveling to London this week, and I will be meeting a very interesting guest, and I look forward to bringing you the episode a week from now. So take care of yourselves. Thanks for listening to us. Once again, if there's anything you do want us to discuss, do drop us a message at the Plank Code, and we will be happy to research it and provide you a little bit of information, or the best that we can do with it. Once again, I'm Max from the Plank Code Podcast. Much love to you all, and talk to you next week. Bye-bye.